And to go back to what happened in Chhattisgarh and the nuns, this is a very clear illustration and example that the state is backing those forces it has unleashed. Bajrang Dal is not fallen from the sky, nor is it Durga Vahini. I mean, my question is, do they need a Bajrang Dal passport? Rajiv Chandrasekhar may be rushing off to Chhattisgarh because he is interested in an electoral result. To believe that it's only the minorities and everybody else is safe, that's not the fact. And if you're committing violence against a Dalit, a woman, you rape her, you murder her, there's no punishment. And if you happen to be a minority man who is a criminal, then it's not the criminality which is to be looked at, it's his religious identity. This is the right of Kerala. This is not some favor that Modi is doing for us. It's our right under the Constitution of India. The thousands of crores of rupees which Kerala is being denied by the central government, just using their brute majority there. We are not there with a begging bowl. We're saying, listen, this is what Kerala has the right to. India, as at one time, a strong ally of justice for Palestine, today has a government which abstains from a vote against Israeli genocide. What is this? Some judgments, for example, the Bombay High Court, I mean, where are you? Where are these judges from? The Bihar thing started in which way? They said, we want to purify the list to remove foreigners, quote unquote. And who are the foreigners? In name, it was to remove foreigners. But the fact is what? The whole exercise is designed to remove the poor from the electoral lists of India. I have no order. None of us have orders. We are communists. Look, an order is something around you, right? Look at my feet. They're on the ground.
We have Comrade Brinda Karat with us. Welcome. You have been in the street for decades or most of your life. Tell me, when will they be able to go back to their homes and when you can go back to your home?
Well, you're right about streets, because I think in a situation where parliamentary democracy is under attack, when parliament is being subverted by the use of the bulldozer against all norms, protocols, and the history of parliament functioning, at such a time, the voice of the street is very important. And when I talk about the voice of the street, I'm talking about the voice of the street which represents the unity of the people and the resolve of the people for saving the soul of India. And I think that's what it is now, that you have a bulldozer which is bulldozing the Constitution and the rights of the people, which they have won through their own struggles and battles and sacrifices. And you have the BJP RSS in power today in Delhi, using Constitution, using parliamentary democracy to subvert it. So that's what the reality is today.
The institution is itself attacking their people. When we go back to the Chhattisgarh, Sister Mary, they have been arrested, jailed and exploited for nothing. And the BJP is using, the Hindutva is suppressing the minorities. And how that can be resolved in this current situation where the psyche of the people is manipulated?
That's a very important point, because, all studies of, historically, of authoritarianism, dictatorships, fascists, like we saw in Germany and in Italy, and today the consolidation of the right wing. It's very true that while they target certain communities, obviously, and in this case in India, you are targeting and you are deliberately targeting. The BJP RSS, as part of its agenda, is targeting minorities. But to believe that it's only the minorities and everybody else is safe, that's not the fact. So whereas Christian minorities, Muslim minorities are under attack, basically it's the poor who are also very much under attack, the Dalits who are under attack. So I think today when we look at those in power, we need to see a comprehensive manner. And what the point you made about manipulating public opinion, that is a very, very big challenge, because you have a media which is either controlled by big business who are in conflict with the Constitution, and I say that deliberately. The big business is in conflict with those parts of the Constitution which grant equality to our citizens. So media taken over by big business, promoting this kind of politics, communal politics, pro-corporate politics, which affects all sections of the people.
The party has stated that the fascism is now doorsteps. So how the monopoly capitalism along with fascist leads the country to an actual fascism?
No, I don't think we'll put it that way, actual and at the doorstep and things like that. We should really look at it as the right-wing takeover with its authoritarianism, with its neo-fascist trends. They're all very evident. So the party's analysis about India is very, very clear. There are no two buts about it. That the BJP RSS, using state power, is subverting the Constitution of India. That is where we are today. And to go back to what happened in Chhattisgarh and the nuns, this is a very clear illustration and example that the state is backing those forces it has unleashed. Bajrang Dal is not fallen from the sky, nor is it Durga Vahini. They are products and created by the BJP RSS politics. So they are products of that politics. And now that they have been created and they have been unleashed, they have full impunity from any kind of action against them. Think about it. You have video evidence. You have evidence of those who were beaten up. You have FIRs filed by the 3 young Adivasi women. And yet today, from the 26th of July, when it happened, to the 12th of August today, no action has been taken against them. And because no action is taken in Chhattisgarh, the same thing happened in Odisha a week later. Nuns and priests were attacked. So this is the DNA of their politics. It's not an aberration.
Not so long ago, the party has equal distance with the Congress and BJP as well in the corporate structure. But later that, the party has stated or took a clear statement that they are opposing BJP by all the means they can. Why is that so important in the current scenario?
Our analysis of the Congress is very clear, that the Congress, in class terms, is very much a representative of the ruling classes, with all the baggage of what the Congress has done to this country when it was in power, the pro-corporate policies, the soft Hindutva, soft communalism, all that is there. But today, the Congress is not, it's the BJP, the RSS, and their bulldozer, which is now controlling all the levers of state power in India. And it's not an ordinary political party, a common party working within the this is a party which is, from the day one, its mentor, the RSS, has said, we don't accept the Constitution of India. We don't accept it. We want the Manusmriti. From 1948, when this was said, to 2025, have you heard a single of their leaders, whether they were in the Hindu Mahasabha, then the Jan Sangh, then the Janata Party, and now the BJP, have you ever heard a single leader saying, no, we were wrong in 1948 and after? Have you? No, never. Have they ever said that India consists of pluralism and we respect all religions? Have you ever heard any of them say that? I mean, Rajiv Chandrasekhar may be rushing off to Chhattisgarh because he is interested in an electoral result of that trip to Chhattisgarh.
The Kerala BJP is saying that they are the only one.
I'm going to come to that, but I'm saying he may be saying that, but is he taking on the Bajrang Dal? Has he said they should be arrested? Has he gone to Odisha? I mean, if Rajiv Chandrasekhar went to Chhattisgarh, I think he should buy a non-stop, all-round air ticket all across India, because every single day a minority is being attacked in India. Every single day. That's a reality.
Thus, Virginia Woolf once said, in order to be independent, a woman needs her own space and money. Even in India, with money and a house or a room of her own, the woman is being raped, attacked, and being murdered. And being born in a family which is minority, that can be the worst that can ever happen to a girl or woman. So, how do you see the plight of women in India by the Manu, the Hindutva, and atrocities against the women in India?
You know, women's movements and organizations have a history of resistance. So every day today, while the Manuvadi forces are moving forward, so also is the resistance of women. So we should not forget that after all, the nuns and those Adivasi girls who were beaten up, humiliated, sexist abuse, the worst kind of sexual verbal abuse, apart from the physical beating against those young women and the nuns. Horribly violent abuse, but they stood up to it. They fought back. When I met the nuns in jail, I found they were so full of dignity and so sure that they would never bow down because they knew they were right. And those young Adivasi women, I mean, my question is, do they need a Bajrang Dal passport? They are adult Adivasi women. They want to go out and look for a job. Chhattisgarh government can't give them a job. They're going out to look for a job. Somebody has offered them a job. Somebody has offered to train them. Do they need a passport from Bajrang Dal? So, Manuvadi ideologies that rob women of their autonomy, and when it is a minority community woman, it is much worse because every rape, every case of sexual assault in the RSS ecosystem is decided as to the identity of the perpetrator and the identity of the victim. What does I mean by that? Hathras is a Dalit woman, a young 19-year-old Dalit woman who was brutally raped by upper caste men. She has not got justice. She was murdered, she was killed. Her family are still waiting for justice for her. Why? Because that government preferred to look after the interests of the landed upper caste accused rather than that young woman and her family. Now, this is what Manusmriti in those particular clauses says. This is the punishment you get. And if you're committing violence against a Dalit, a woman, you rape her, you murder her, there's no punishment. And if you happen to be a minority man, who is a criminal, then it's not the criminality which is to be looked at, it's his religious identity. To use as a complete instrument to demonize a whole community. So for women today, the whole struggle against violence against women is sought to be subverted by a communal lens which decides the public response depending on the religious or caste identity of the perpetrator or the victim. I mean, that's something that we are fighting against today. But we have to be very aware of it.
Okay, the Manusmriti is asserting in universities as well. They are trying to suffrage students. And the last day in Kerala, the governor Arlekar has said that in August 14th, they should be celebrated as the Vibhajan, Peedi Smriti Din, something like that. And a party who has no role in the independence of India is trying to rewrite the history of the country itself for their own political gains. And how to fight back against suffragizing our colleges and all.
I think it's very important today to see, first of all, you have to study also. Students have a very important responsibility to study. And if you look at the syllabus in the various courses, there is ample evidence that they are manufacturing history, they're distorting history, and they're teaching our students a very biased view of history. And in some cases, not history at all. So if students are aware of these things, and if student organizations can present the data and the facts to them, which also requires study, well, then I think the movement to save our education and to save our campuses gets that much stronger. After all, every student organization should have the right to put their point of view before the students. That's democracy in the campus. In some states in India, there are no elections at all. They have banned elections. There are no student elections allowed. That's what's happening in Rajasthan, where BJP is there. In Bengal also today, in so many institutions, they refuse to allow elections. But the point is, through those elections, we need to have an ideological clarity. And it is that ideological clarity alone which is going to stop the saffronization of campuses. Saffronization doesn't come because some gundas of some right-wing organization go and try and beat up students. That can be easily resisted. It's of the mind. It's to poison minds with distortions of history. And I think student organizations especially have a very important role to play in preventing this from happening. It's very important to raise your voice of protest. But this is while the governor, all over India today, the post of the governor is being subverted to become the ambassador of the central government, not the Constitution of India. That's a fact. So to that extent, what the governor is doing is extremely wrong because he is going beyond, far beyond his constitutional position and subverting it. I would say that our struggle has to be a broader struggle because these are just symbols. We oppose those symbols. But what is behind those symbols is that toxic politics which is trying to change the whole syllabus and the whole process of education. And that is what we have to oppose very strongly. And we have to put the facts before the students.
It's about the importance of raising voice. And we know what Israel did. Even there's people who are supporting Israel and they're saying that there's no need of raising voice because you are raising voice in India and there's no use. So when people are saying like that, what's the importance of registering protests?
I mean, I can't imagine a world in which human conscience is deadened to the extent that we are not appalled by the genocide and now the starvation genocide in Gaza. And this is a reflection of right-wing politics in India, ABVP, RSS organizations, who equate what is happening in Gaza with a completely communal lens. That is what is just so appalling to me. India, as at one time, a strong ally of justice for Palestine, today has a government which abstains from a vote against Israeli genocide. What is this? You want to equate what Israeli Zionists are doing with that terrible attack by the Hamas in October 2 years ago. It's unbelievable that we are in such a state. And the fight against Zionism and the Israeli regime, the Netanyahu regime, is also a fight against Trump. And they don't dare to do it. They don't dare to open their mouth. Every day Trump is talking such utter rubbish, trying to control the world, being the hegemon of the world. And what are we doing? So,
the judiciary as well is supporting this thing.
And some judgments, for example, the Bombay High Court, most appalling judgments saying, talk about waste management, why are you discussing Palestine? I mean, where are you? Where are these judges from? Which world are they living in? Do they have a judicial conscience? Is there any moral compass in our institutions? I really get puzzled when I listen to all of this. But today I just got a message saying that the Bombay High Court and the Bombay police have now allowed a protest in Bombay. So that's a step forward.
The minorities, the Muslims, the Christians, the Dalits and the Adivasis and all, after that they say the internal enemy. The third internal enemy is the communist. Mm-hmm. So even when they are saying the CPIM or communist parties just limited in Kerala, they are just a few in the country, there's some kind of fear against communists in this BJP thing. And how they are thinking the communists are a threat to their politics.
Well, I think for once they're right. Because when they identify the communists as being an internal enemy for whom and to whom, that's the issue. Certainly not for India, because it's a communist who fought for India and who fought for our freedom, while these gentlemen's ancestors were bowing before the British and touching their feet and writing them mercy letters and petitions. So certainly they're not talking about internal enemy for India. They're talking about an internal enemy as far as their own toxic ideology is concerned. And there's absolutely no doubt about it. Today in the whole country, if there's one force which is uncompromising, has been, is, and always will be, to the communal politics of the BJP. It's not because it's this vote or that vote. We are fighting for the constitution for minorities in areas where there's no issue of a vote because we're not fighting those seats or we're not fighting in that state, unlike other parties. So this is a commitment to radical social change, because how can you talk about social change if your people are going to be divided on the basis of religious belief? So you have to fight the caste system. You have to fight those who utilize the personal belief of an individual in this or that religion and try and manipulate it for political ends. That's what Hindutva is. Hindutva has nothing to do with Hindu religious belief. Hindutva, as defined by Savarkar, has got nothing to do with Hindu religion. It's everything to do with power and the setting up of a framework to achieve that power. And that is what this whole BJP RSS rule is about. And the communists are opposed to it. We are dead opposed to it. And we won't compromise on that. That's the reality. That's our history.
When we coming back to Kerala, the BJP is playing a dirty hatred politics in Kerala because they are even trying to cut off the funds of Kerala to put Kerala through an economic crisis and to harvest electoral political gain. And even the Wayanad that happened, the land has lost everything in a wink of time, and the BJP is doing nothing. The Prime Minister came here and has said he will do everything, and he kissed the baby and he left. Now, how this hatred politics is going to work in Kerala, and what do you think about the scenario of Kerala in all these aspects?
By the way, I met that baby who the Prime Minister took a photo op shoot with. And I met the family.
Okay.
And I understood the depth of the tragedy. And I also understood the bravery of those who are looking after that baby. And it is a shame on the Prime Minister and the government he runs that such low-level politics, that even humanitarian issues such as dealing with the landslide in Wayanad have been tainted by them. And when I say tainted, I mean in every respect. This is the right of Kerala. This is not some favor that Modi is doing for us. It's our right under the Constitution of India. It's our right. Yesterday when the finance minister went and met Nirmala Sitharaman, all the facts that he gave, the thousands of crores of rupees which Kerala is being denied by the central government, just using their brute majority there, forcing our finance minister to go there, and every time giving facts. We are not there with a begging bowl. We're saying, listen, this is what Kerala has the right to. What is the debt of the central government? How much borrowing is the central government doing and for what? Our revenue has increased in Kerala. We have increased our revenues. The central government, by giving away huge tax concessions to big business, is cutting down on social sector. They've cut it down by something like 17% in their budgetary allocations over the years. And Kerala, we are trying to expand it. Instead of that, by starving us of funds, they are trying to cut down on the Kerala model and the Kerala inspirational model. So this is an assault on the federal character of the Constitution of India. And this BJP does not deserve a single vote in Kerala. What it is doing to Kerala in terms of the central government's treatment to Kerala, it should make every single BJP pracharak here in Kerala hang his head in shame.
And moving on from the topic, at what point of time you really thought that the revolution is imminent and inevitable and you decided to join the party? And I just read about the Rita in the emergency period and all. And how did you organize all those workers in the factory, and how was the life in the emergency as a
Gayatri, now that's an entirely different chapter. But I can tell you, those of us who are in the party and who are working in the party always believe in the imminence of revolution. We don't see revolution as a very distant goal, which is not going to... People say, oh, this won't happen in my lifetime. No, there's change happening in our lifetime. When I see women standing up and fighting for their rights, that's a huge change from when we, thought that would we ever get that kind of a response to our movement. And when we see young people coming out and fighting for justice. For example, what happened with the nuns has been a nationwide support. So it's not as though the BJP is having a, free run. People are standing up. And all this adds up to a momentum which is required for revolutionary change. So I always believe that whatever we are doing today and must be for the revolution.
Okay, when we talk about the revolution, the Gen Z is doing kind of revolution right now. They are not ready to do any corporate job that exploits them. They'll say it on face that they are not ready to work overtime, or they are not ready to sacrifice anything and all. So they are making a kind of revolution, but still the people who are quitting jobs, the Gen Zs, they quit the job and they just disappear. And it's out of the support of the middle class or a newly emerged middle class thing. But don't you think that to organize these kids, these Gen Z kids, isn't important? Don't they need to be?
No, but are Gen Z kids leaving jobs?
Yes.
I don't even think they're getting jobs. Are they? I mean, they're not getting jobs. Forget them leaving jobs. And the job market is so pathetic today that even after studying, even after all, there's this kind of a branding of what is a Gen Z kid. I don't know, because I see them in the bastis of Delhi. I see young people who really believe that since they've been educated, they have the right to a better world and a better job. They're not getting those jobs. So what I think is that this generation which is growing up on the campuses, schools and campuses today, they are facing the worst situation as far as their own futures are concerned. And I think that is what has to be the motivating factor. And I have hope that there are so many. Look at what's happening across the world. It's young people who are coming out in support of Gaza. All over the world. Look what happened in Australia. Just miles of people.
In Japan as well.
Everywhere, over the world. And I think in India, it's happening at a different level. But I think it's happening. And I think we just have to make sure it happens sooner rather than later.
Okay, don't you think that they should get an awareness between the class politics and identity politics in much more nice way? Or
I mean, it depends on the movements and how far we are able to involve them. And, they're part of us after all.
the legendary communist who has lived more than 100 years, and Usage is almost the same as the Communist Party of India. The leader, Comrade V.S. Achyutanandan, has made his last revolutionary greetings to fellow comrade these days, and even his presence was a political statement. He defined the word aura. And how do you remember Comrade V.S. in this time?
Well, it's not just how I remember, it's how the whole world and how the whole of Kerala remembers him, because Kerala was out on the streets to pay homage to him. And it's extraordinary that from the age of, I think, 15 or 16, till his last breath, he fought for the people. And I always say that V.S. was a warrior for the rights of the poor people of Kerala and for India. And I think that is how he would have liked to be remembered. And I'm sure that is how he is remembered. He is a warrior against exploitation. And he always had with a red flag in his hand. That's very important to remember. That V.S. was inspired by Marxism-Leninism. V.S. was inspired by the communist goal of socialism. So that is very much a part of V.S. which we know and which we own, because he was a communist leader. And of course, his appeal was among a very, very wide section of the people, all sections of society. and especially the poor.
The word aura suits Comrade Brinda Karat as well, because your
I-
presence, your physical presence is a political statement nowadays. And how a person's presence,
My dear Gayatri, please don't. I would request you have no aura. None of us have auras. We are communists. Look, an aura is something around you, right? Look at my feet. They're on the ground, right?
yes,
So when you look at a communist, don't look for aura. Look at their feet. Are the feet on the ground? Are the feet on the streets? Then you can talk about that. Okay?
okay, one more thing. The Independence Day is near and the whole opposition is in street, the vote sharing. How the constitution, how the electoral politics and how the electoral constitution is going to be saved, and what's the importance of the fight in this Independence Day?
I think it's very important today to join the dots. The Bihar thing started in which way? They said we want to purify the list to remove foreigners, quote unquote. And who are the foreigners? They started off with Bangladeshis, Bengali speaking Muslims. So, attack on the minorities. So, in name, it was to remove foreigners. But the fact is what? The whole exercise is designed to remove the poor from the electoral lists of India. The migrant workers. It's like the market says you have no identity if you don't have money in your pocket to come and buy a product. During the British time, there was no universal franchise. If you had money in your pocket and you had property, you were allowed to vote. 10 to 15% only were there when the Constituent Assembly was voted. Only 10 to 15% of voters. That's what the BJP and RSS believe in. They believe in that feudal Raj and Maharaja and Ranis. They've never believed in the power of the poor and the people. So what they're doing is, in the name of purification, quote unquote, they're removing the poor. So start off with foreigners and end up with removing the poor. Start off with universal franchise and end up by doing what the British did, which is to limit the franchise to certain parts of the population who are poor enough, who have to migrate. They don't have the right to vote. But those who are rich enough to stay where they are, they will have the right to vote. I think that's sickening.
So the imminent revolution will take over. What do you think?
I think there's going to be a big struggle to defend India and to defend democracy in India. And also, we must not forget that there are ruling classes who are in favor of limiting the franchise, who are in favor of limiting democracy. Because when workers organize, when Kisans organize, it affects their profits. It affects the maximization of profits. So there's also a class angle to this huge attack you're seeing against the Constitution of India. We must keep that in mind too.
Thank you, Gauri.
Thank you. Thank you, Gayatri.